welcome back to another Read with Shlee. We are doing another book review / book talk, and today we will be discussing Sky Full of Elephants by Cebo Campbell. What an absolutely great read. I cannot express enough how enjoyable this was. It goes into some science a little bit, which really kind of threw me off because I am not a science person in the slightest. But that's okay. It was still a really interesting read, and I feel like without the science, it wouldn't have really had an impact that it did. But basically, if you're new here, what we do is we go through the context of the book, why it was written. We go through the characters, some of my major points that I really enjoyed, and there are a lot today. And then there was something really unique about this book is it mentioned a lot of notable Black inventors, authors, etc. And so I'm going to highlight them as well today. And then I'm going to go through my favorite quotes, and then I am going to go through other medias I think would be really beneficial to watch, read, or listen to that kind of coincides with the book. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, so obviously Sky Full of Elephants. It was written in 2024 in the latter half of the year. It was released September 10th. So, about 11 months ago? But basically, the reason Campbell says he wrote it is because he was reading Paradise by Toni Morrison, and there is, one of the opening lines is, they shoot the white girl first, with the rest they can take their time. And he found that really striking, and I too found that really striking, because I think it just shows this repetitiveness of allowing a Black person to suffer and wanting white people to not suffer as much, which is just really, really intriguing. We see this narrative continuously happening back before America was even a thing, and even to present day. So I can definitely see why that inspired him to just be like, whoa, what are we doing here? He also realized the more he was watching media, whether that be TV or movies or even like reading novels or short stories, that there was a lack of Black representation. And he originally wanted to write like a comedy or something kind of lighthearted, but as he was writing, it just didn't feel natural. It didn't feel like that's what he was supposed to be writing. And so that is how Sky Full of Elephants came about. So just kind of the idea of what it means to be Black. If you don't know what Sky Full of Elephants is about, one, I would say turn the video off, go read it first and then come back. But if you've already read it or you don't care about spoilers, this book is set in a time period that we do not know. But 100 years prior to the events taking place in this novel, all of the white people in America walked into the nearest body of water and drowned themselves. And it left only non-white people. And so our main character, Charlie Brenton, he is a professor at Howard University, but before that he was imprisoned for 20 years due to a rape allegation. It is later revealed to us that it was a false allegation, and the woman who accused him of that, who is also the mother of his daughter, Sydney, was lying to protect her white brother, right? And then we have Sydney, who is another main character, which is Charlie's daughter. And she calls him up and is like, hey, I know we don't know each other, but I need you to take me somewhere unless you're just going to leave again. So obviously she has some daddy issues going on, right? In the slightest way to put it. And he gets over to Kenosha, Wisconsin, and he goes to pick her up, and they take a road trip down to Alabama. Well, I say road trip. They went to Chicago, and they got into a plane with two characters, Sailor and Zoo, and flew down to Mississippi. From there, they drove through to Alabama to get to Orange Beach, where Sydney believed her family was, her Aunt Agnes. And as they're making their way through Alabama, they get stopped by people, and they get taken to the king and queen of now Alabama, obviously. And there they learn to tune into their Black selves and not feel the burden of comparing themselves to other Black people or comparing themselves to what this idea of Blackness means, without the burden of white people telling them what they can and cannot do. And so it just kind of takes us on their journey of like self-discovery, but also how to exist within a space with other Black people. Might I add, Sydney is mixed, so she has struggled with identity her whole life, living in a white community, never having really interacted with Black people. As we continue on, we see that Sydney is finding comfort in her identity as a mixed person, as a biracial woman. And Charlie is finding his voice again as a Black man. And as it continues, we find out why the white people walked in to the water, which I will not spoil that. It was just so good. It was so well revealed to us, and it was so profound in the like reasoning why the white people walked in. I know that was kind of all over the place, but that's basically what the book is about. Identity and black consciousness, and finding out like who you are as a person in relation to other people. So without further ado, let's get into the characters. Obviously, we have Charlie Brunton. He is our main character. He's a black man. He was incarcerated for 20 years for false rape allegations, and he is the father of Sydney. And Sydney is Charlie and Elizabeth, who is the woman who said that Charlie did rape her. She's mixed race, and she kind of grew up with only white people, so she has a lot of trust issues and identity insecurities. And then we have Sailor, who is a pilot. And then we have Zoo, who is Sailor's child, and them two take Sydney and Charlie to Alabama together. And then we have Hosea, who's the king of Alabama, and he's married to Vivian. They have 4 children together, which we'll get into in a second. He is a philosopher, and his name means salvation and savior, which in the context of who he is and the things he did in this book, I think that is just such a spectacular name to give to him. Because there's a line, he says, "I chose us." And that line is just so beautiful and powerful within the context of the novel. And then we have Vivian, who's the queen of Alabama, kind of the head of the household. She's obviously married to Hosea. And their 4 children are Tao, Phila, Nona, and Harold. She is just a badass woman. She is so powerful. She commands a room like nobody else. And I obviously am not there to see her command the room, but through the words that Campbell was using, I could just feel the energy and feel the stronghold that she had and the power in her soul. And Vivian means alive, lively, so that's also really interesting. And I feel like she is the life of that space. She is the one who kind of helps curate and bring peace and comfort throughout Alabama, and especially Mobile, which is where they are. And then we have Tao, who's I believe he's the oldest son of Hosea and Vivian, and he is the representation of an angry black man. And throughout the novel, that is almost the only way he is described. He is described as angry, stoic, and commanding. Those 3 words are just continuously repeated with him. And anger in this novel is not seen as like a bad thing, which I think is really cool. Anger is seen as something that's deserved because of all the turmoil and the trials and the tribulations that black people have had to go throughout literally at least 400 years, if not more, in this world. And his justification for his anger is that his people have never been treated right. And that is so true. And his name means lion, by the way. And I feel like that is just very fitting with who he is as a person. And then we have Phila, who's also a son of Hosea. He likes Sydney. He's very in tune with emotions and very in tune with discovering yourself without forcing you to do anything. Him and Sydney have a little fling, which I think is so cute. I love it so much. But regardless, his name means success and lucky, and I think that is a testament to who he is and the actions he takes within the novel. And then we have Nona, who's the singular daughter. She's the princess of Alabama. She is very kind, she's charismatic, and she is very welcoming and has some aura about her. Again, obviously I'm not literally there to like feel the aura and like understand who she is, but the way that she is written is just so endearing. I want to say it's so endearing. She knows exactly what to say. She is articulate, and she is very meticulous with the words that she uses. And then we have Harold, who is another last child as well. And he is very scientific, very intelligent in how getting connections to work and things of the sort. And so him and Charlie get along very well, and they work on things together and like really get together. And then finally we have Seraphim, who is the healer or like the mystic of Alabama within the royal court. The way that this book talks about royalty is just so beyond anything else, because we know royalty to be kind of like overrulers. You have your servants, you have people below you, you have getting anything you want, whereas royalty in this novel is more so just, we are here to lead you and guide you, like please come to us and we will find a way to make whatever you need happen. So the way royalty and monarchy is played in this is, I love it. It's just such like a comparison of like white royalty versus like black royalty, and it's just like such a clear defined line and what those look like. But Seraphin, she really gives me the vibes of Annie from Sinners, if you've seen it. Just someone who knows exactly what's going on, who knows why things are happening, and where you can kind of figure out the best way to heal yourself internally. It's not always about making others feel better, but sometimes it's just about you, and they both are so strong in that way. But yeah, so those are the characters. They're really, really interesting. I could say probably tons more, but we got to get into the really hot topics that I've been yearning to talk about. So basically, the first 3 pages of this book, right, absolutely jaw-dropping. I don't know if I have read better writing. I'm being so completely serious. These are the first couple lines. They killed themselves. All of them, all at once. We unsealed the jails first. Folks showed up swinging bolt cutters to liberate their lawless relatives into a world different from the society out of which they were exiled. Because no one stood guard anymore. No longer could anyone be exiled from anywhere. What? That is like, obviously if you don't know anything about the book, you're like, well, who is that? Like, who are they talking about? Who were the guards? Why are all the guards gone? Who are the lawless people? What is going on here? And that was so striking to me, and that is literally what the whole first 3 pages is like. So, oh my god, I'm obsessed. Oh my gosh. And then it kind of goes on to how small things were kind of like disappearing, right? Like certain snacks or certain foods were gone, certain TV shows or movies could never happen again. And then later, like near the very, very end of the novel, when Sydney makes it to Orange Beach, it's the people there are called walkers. And they are people who believe because they were not drowned with the white people, they are huge sinners, and so they try and like figure everything out they can to try and be saved with the white people. But white people are attributed with being police officers, taking their kids out in strollers, having yoga pants on, and having organized religion. And I found that really, really interesting that is something attributed to white people, because obviously as a white person, taking kids out in strollers seems really normal to me. Wearing yoga pants seems really normal to me. Organized religion. I grew up in a Christian household, and so that was something I was like, okay, yeah, like we go to church every Sunday, whatever. But clearly that is not the case here, right? There is just like a different culture that is never really put in the spotlight in current America as we see it today. And so they're trying to like recreate that image and recreate that idea of whiteness in Orange Beach to feel normalcy again, where they're not really taking advantage to discover who they are outside of white people. And so in the novel, obviously white people like ran America. They were the guards, they were the ones making the TV shows, they were the ones running the fast food, the grocery store, they were the ones doing all these jobs, okay? And now that they're all gone, it all kind of died out. And 100 years later, nobody has decided or really on a large scale chosen to remake any of it. And so I think that is just such a cool testament to like whiteness and how its impact has on not allowing other cultures to flourish. And this book allows black culture to truly flourish and just become what it needs to be in its own way. Which again is so different for so many people, because there's no one definition of what it means to be black or have blackness with you, right? Which during college, I took an African American literature and culture class, and that was one of our like major themes throughout the whole course. There's like David Walker. He was 1786 to 1830. He wanted to unite every single black person with the same goal and the same identity to have this shared space where they could all exist and do the same thing. But obviously not everyone wanted the same thing, right? Because just because you are black does not mean you want to live a certain way, or just because you are white does not mean you want to live a certain way. And so it's really interesting that even in today's conversation, back in 1780s, there was that conversation of what does it mean to be black? What should you want if you are black? We're still having that conversation today, and I think that's a testament that there is no answer. Like, people can share a culture and can share an identity, but still be individualistic and still have their own thoughts and their own ways of doing things and their own way of living. And so I just thought this idea of blackness is so throughout, like literally every single person does something different. Like when they're processing their grief of either people dying, because of family that they had or friends, of grief of not knowing what to do next, feeling lost in yourself because now you don't have someone saying you are this, you have to act that way, or you have to do this. A man goes into the Oval Office and just gets completely shit-faced. One woman completely burns down a forest. Which, side note, I was scrolling on TikTok and this person, Jack Mitchell, he was taking photos in the American South, and these photos came up, and I thought they were absolutely stunning. And this is exactly what I picture. I'm from the South, so this is exactly what I picture when I think of the South, and I thought it was really interesting. But we then have like the walkers, right, who are trying to recreate this idea of being white and have the same ideas of how to live because they want to be saved too. And then we have some people who just kind of went on with their life. They're like, well, anyways, you be still on for dinner next week. Like, what's the vibes? And then you also had, obviously, Mobile, Alabama, where they have a king and a queen now. And it's created for unity to allow people to exist in the way they choose to. One thing that really struck me is when we first get into Mobile, Alabama, Charlie, our main character, he notes that there are so many different people there. Barbados, Egypt, Haiti, etc., etc. I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. But they also have all these different ways to live. Some people are worshiping on their knees. Some people are burning sage throughout their house. And they are not being told you are right for doing this or you are wrong for doing this. They are simply being allowed to exist, which I think is just so beautiful, because it's such a testament to one of the pillars of my life is like there's no correct way to live life. And I just think the Mobile place does a great way of showing that, of like all these different people, they have different identities, they're all black, but they still are different in who they are, right? They all think differently, they all want different things in life, some of them want love, some want to live in solace, some want kids, some want to go and just run around and be free. And there's no shame in doing any of that in Mobile, Alabama. And so going back to what like blackness, this idea of it, it's like there is no judgment for right or wrong in this. It's just the ability to coexist together and like be with each other, which I just stunning. Oh my god. But yeah, and then there is a theme of religion throughout it, which is really interesting as well, because Sydney, when she went to go to the lesser fortunate area, she went with her church, and they're the church is the ones who were like, oh, you're a biracial child, you were definitely a less fortunate. Like, what? And so it's like religion, it was her safe space, and then it obviously was not a space that welcomed her, which is just so fascinating. But there is definitely this theme of religion and like salvation and sinning and grace and mercy upon people throughout the novel, shown through different characters. And Seraphine is definitely a big one, because she is obviously the mystic or the healer, and people see that as like spiritual, which can be related to religious aspects in some way. And then there is this also idea of darkness throughout the novel, and in the early novel it starts out as something kind of evil and cruel, and something that should be feared, and by the end of the novel it turns out to be something that should be celebrated and rejoiced, because darkness is not a bad thing. But there's this one line, okay, here it is. The beauty of his spirit hidden in conflict, like a great treasure of the world, hoarded and entombed so as to never know its worth. Down deep in the heart of that darkness, Charlie found himself. Darkness vibrant, joy, creativity, dynamism, brilliance, and more love than could ever be buried. That's what Charlie saw. Darkness that generated a special kind of light. That is on page 275. And that is 11 pages before the end of the book, and I just think that completely encapsulates every single mention of darkness in this novel, because obviously at the beginning it's something like that you should be ashamed of, and near the end it's something that you should be proud of, and that you should be like, hey, I am going to exist in this space regardless of the darkness within me or the darkness on the outside of me, which is just really beautiful, in my opinion. And then we have this idea of wholeness. Sydney, obviously being a biracial woman, she says, I'm two things at once, which means I'm never fully one. Half of two different worlds, I'll never be whole, which is on page 156. And then a little bit later in the book, Hosea is working on a machine, and he talks about how there is shattered glass of all black people that there was, is, and will be. And the only way to make the black people whole again is to pick up all the pieces of shattered glass and put them back together. And that just like made me think, like, well, who gets to decide that a person is whole or a group is whole? Who gets to decide when all of the pieces have been picked up? When do the pieces stop? What does it mean to be whole? And how can one achieve that if maybe they don't know where all the pieces are? So I just found that really, really encapsulating. That wholeness is also a huge major theme. I wrote down that I was going to talk about where the title Sky Full of Elephants comes from, but I think that I kind of want y'all to come to your own conclusion on that. It is on page 196, where it talks about like why it was named that and all of that good stuff. But I don't know if it's my space to speak on it as a white woman, because I've never experienced things of the sort, and I obviously can't speak to it. But I really challenge you to go find that line where it talks about it on page 196 and just sit with it for a second and understand it for yourself, because it is something that has given me a new perspective on when I step outside and how I go about my day, and just like the understanding of the pressure in this world that I will never experience and that I have to be conscious of. And then another thing I wanted to speak on was, so Hosea is talking about his grandma, and he says that she taught him, his grandfather, how to see further, wider, clearer. A good woman always does. And this really struck me because in my AFM Lit class that I took in college, we actually did talk about black women and black men. There was Harriet Jacobs and Anna Julia Cooper who really kind of pioneered this idea and this discourse amongst black women during that time period, and I'm sure it's still around today, just in obviously more subtle forms, that black men were never getting the job done of freedom, and so women now had to be caretakers of the home because that was their societal expectation, but now they also had to be the one fighting for their freedom as like a group of people. And so just the idea that even in this novel where women are so powerful, obviously the queen has power over everything. The king, he's the king, but he doesn't really get the big say in all of it. And Nona, the princess, she is the one who, if she needs something and her brother's like, no, she's the young sister, and they still abide by her because they know how powerful women are. And so it's just really interesting and fascinating to me that this discourse of women being the ones who are supportive and loving and caring and getting stuff done is still happening today. Like, when do women get a break? When do black women get a break from having to liberate themselves? Last two things before I get into some notable black people mentioned in this novel. They talk about manifest destiny in it, and they say obviously it's a westward expansion all the way, and you get all the way to Malibu, you plant your house on the coast, and now your front door is facing the waters and your back is to your country. And that, I had never heard that before. That put in such a new perspective of, I know they are trying to talk about whiteness in that way because it was obviously white people going and doing that, but I also see it as like a socioeconomic status, and the people who currently live in Malibu or California, whatever it is, just have this idea of like higher than and power, and a large majority of them are white. Their whole backs to their country, and they're never looking outward to it. They're never reaching to help it. And I just thought that was a really interesting way to define manifest destiny. And then finally, Mardi Gras. There's a Mardi Gras scene in this novel, and it reminds me of Sammy from Sinners. I just rewatched it, so it's fresh on my mind. But the Sammy in Sinners, where he is singing at the juke joint, and he is playing his guitar, and then all of a sudden, like, hundreds of generations of Africans and African American music is coming to life. We even see Asian inspired music coming in, and it's showing that music is truly something that binds us all together, and celebration and community is like so needed for preservation of just like humanity.
There are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true it can pierce the veil between life and death, conjuring spirits from the past
Somebody take me
and the future.
night. I love the blues. I love the
But yeah, so those are kind of like my big main thoughts. I know that was a lot and I spoke pretty fast, but I really hope y'all got something from that. And if I said anything that you agree, disagree with, or just question, let me know. I'm obviously always open for conversation. But I just wanted to talk about some of the notable Black people that were mentioned in this novel. I did not know all of them, and so I really wanted to shed light and kind of celebrate their greatness. So first we have Nikki Giovanni. She is an American poet and author. We have Chinua Achebe, who is a Nigerian poet and author. He is also the author of Things Fall Apart. Granville T. Woods, who was the first African-American mechanical and electrical engineer after the Civil War. We have Lewis Latimer, who is an American inventor. He helped create the AC, so thank God, oh my goodness. James E. West, who was an inventor and an acoustician. Mark Dean, an inventor and an engineer. Malcolm X, who is a civil rights activist. Duke Ellington, who is a pianist and composer. Lorraine Hansberry, who is a playwright and writer. She wrote Raisin in the Sun. Martin Luther King Jr., who is a civil rights activist. Nelson Mandela, who was a South African activist and former president of South Africa. Angela Davis, who is a political activist. And Gwendolyn Bennett, who is an artist and writer, and her poem, Fantasy, is in this novel. So if you get a chance, definitely go and read her poetry. Read all of their work, go see their invention, and thank them for all of the great things that we have today. Then we have my favorite quotes. I'm just going to kind of read these and then maybe talk about them after. Did any place exist where the path to her daughter finding herself wasn't obstructed? Was there ever any room in this country for little Black girls to fully self-actualize? Page 56. Water in a cup, Charlie thought, with no memory of being the ocean. Page 79. Her not feeling ashamed about all that happened is the same as not feeling anything at all. Page 111. Who am I? Never shouted so loudly, and yet it was muted by the boom of Nona's I am. Page 141. What you're scared of is the burden of changing yourself with it. Page 260. But what of her father's ancestors who did not arrive at all but were stolen, who bled, burned, and hanged to have their dreams deferred? Page 268. And Charlie had given that up, all because someone else refused to see him. Page 275. I think those quotes are absolutely beautiful, and out of context, they make so much sense. You can completely understand what is being said here in each and every single one of them. But within the context of their pages that they're written and the characters who are saying them, it just reverberates so much more because you know those characters and you know why they're saying it. And you know the deeper meaning behind it. So I definitely recommend reading this book, looking out for those quotes, and truly understanding the full context of them. And then finally, last thing that we're going to talk about, just some other media that I think y'all should consume if you really liked this book. Shelby in the Book Club, which is a YouTube channel. I watched her book review of Sky Full of Elephants, and I really like the way she speaks, and I like the way that she looks back on Blackness and Black consciousness, and in relation to this being a Black woman, which is pretty interesting. And then we have Brittany, another YouTube channel. I also watched her review of this. Her and Shelby had different takes on the novel, but that's okay. That's what book reviews are about. That's what books are about. It's to kind of challenge each other and see where you have a different perspective. And then a novel called James. I have not read it yet, but Shelby, the woman I mentioned earlier with her YouTube channel, she recommended it, and one of my friends just read it too, and so that's going to be on my reading list so I can kind of compare it, because they're both about intelligent Black men who are kind of like journeying through this life. And then A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. Lorraine Hansberry mentioned her earlier. I actually taught A Raisin in the Sun with my students during my internship, and they absolutely adored it. So if you have not read it or if you have not watched it, I totally recommend doing so. Native Son by Richard Wright. This is currently on my read list. I have the book. I have not picked it up yet because I was finishing Lil right here. It also was turned into a movie, so maybe if reading isn't your thing, that's totally okay. They do have a movie version of it. And then these are a couple pictures by people who submitted their artwork to the Griffith Science Museum here in Chicago. And when I went to their exhibition this past May, these have still stuck with me since then. The first one is Denial's Mask by Kalia Short. Zen by Dancy Coulter. And Washing Away Your Abuse by Alex Smith. And finally, the last thing I'm going to leave y'all with on this media is Harlem by Langston Hughes. If you caught me earlier, I did talk about having their dreams deferred, and that's exactly what this poem is about. But also, Lorraine Hansberry uses this poem as a bounce off to help write A Raisin in the Sun. But yeah, so if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything that I've said, please let me know. If you agree with anything, if you disagree, I would love to hear out, because obviously as a white woman, I do not know the full scope of all of this, and I can't fully grasp and understand the idea that Cebo Campbell is trying to portray in this. And so I definitely want to hear y'all's thoughts. I definitely want y'all to go and find black YouTubers who are speaking of this and fully understand it, and go seek out black art and black music and try and figure out how to make sense of something that is as mind-warping and beautifully and eloquently written as this book. So yeah, bye guys!